They were shaking. That changed everything. Whatever I had thought this ride might be, uncomfortable, strange, charged in a way I didn't want to admit, it wasn't that anymore. Something was wrong. "Take me somewhere private," she whispered. The light turned green. I didn't move. For one stupid second, I misunderstood her. Not because Mara had done anything to invite that, because I was a man in a dark car with a woman I had spent years pretending not to notice, and she had just said the kind of sentence that rearranges the air. Then I saw her eyes. There was no seduction in them. There was fear. "Private where?" I asked. "Not your house, not mine." She swallowed hard. "Somewhere we can talk without Caroline knowing." My hands tightened on the wheel. Why would Caroline need not to know? Mara looked down at her phone. Then she said, "Because she's the reason." I pulled into the parking lot of a closed pharmacy 3 blocks later. It was lit enough to feel safe, empty enough to feel private. Rain tapped against the roof. The sign above us buzzed faintly, half the letters dark. For a while Mara didn't speak. She just sat there with her phone in both hands like it weighed more than metal and glass. I kept my voice low. "Tell me what's going on." She shook her head. "You're going to hate me." "That's not an answer." "I should have told you earlier." Mara. Her name came out sharper than I meant it to. She flinched, and I hated myself for it immediately. "I'm sorry," I said. "No." She wiped one hand across her cheek, angry at the tear before it had fully fallen. "You have nothing to apologize for. That's the problem." I stared at her. She unlocked her phone, opened a message thread, and held it out. I didn't take it at first. Some part of me understood that once I did, my life would split into before and after. Then I took the phone. The messages were from Caroline. At first my brain refused to read them properly, then the words sharpened. "If Elliot asks, I was with you after yoga. Just say we had drinks." Mara had replied, "Caroline, I'm not comfortable lying to him." Caroline, "Don't be dramatic. He won't even ask. He's too trusting." Another message. "Men like Elliot are useful because they think loyalty makes them noble. It just makes them easy." The inside of the car went very still. I read that last line 3 times. Useful. Easy. Mara watched my face as if every second hurt her. "That's not all," she whispered. I could barely hear myself. "What is this?" "She's been using me as an alibi." "For what?" Mara closed her eyes. When she opened them, the shame there was not hers, but she was carrying it anyway. At first I thought it was just someone she was seeing. I hated it, but I told myself it wasn't my marriage and I didn't know enough. Her voice broke slightly. "Then last week she asked me to confirm a story that made you look controlling." I looked up from the phone. "What story?" "That you track her. That you question where she goes. That she needs witnesses because you make her feel trapped." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was insane. Caroline came and went whenever she wanted. I never checked her phone, never followed her, never asked for passwords. Half the time I learned where she had been because someone tagged her in photos 2 days later. "That's not true," I said. "I know." The speed of her answer hit me, not defensive, certain. Mara leaned closer, not much, but enough that I could see the rain reflected in her eyes. "I know who you are, Elliot." Something in my chest moved. I didn't want it to, not then. Not with my wife's messages glowing between us. But it moved anyway. Because my wife had just called me useful and easy, and the woman sitting beside me looked at those same parts of me like they were worth protecting. Mara reached for her phone and our fingers touched. Barely. A stupid, accidental brush. Still, both of us froze. She pulled back first. "I didn't bring you here for that," she said quickly. I know." "I mean it." "I know." Her eyes held mine. For one dangerous second, the car felt too small. Then she looked away and opened another file on her phone. An audio recording. My stomach dropped. "Mara," I said carefully, what is that?" She stared at the screen, thumb hovering over play. "The reason I couldn't stay quiet anymore." Outside, rain ran down the windshield in crooked lines. Inside, my whole marriage sat in her shaking hand. Then Mara whispered, "Before I play this, you need to understand something." I looked at her. Her voice was barely steady. "Caroline isn't just leaving you, Elliot. She's preparing people to believe you deserved it." I didn't want her to play it. That was the truth. A cowardly truth, maybe, but still the truth. Because messages could be explained away if a man was desperate enough. Tone could be misunderstood. Context could be missing. A cruel sentence typed in irritation could be dressed up later as stress, sarcasm, a moment. But a voice? A voice was harder to save yourself from. Mara watched me in the passenger seat, thumb still hovering over the audio file. "You don't have to hear it tonight," she said. That almost made me laugh, not because it was funny, because she had just handed me the edge of a cliff and was still trying to be considerate about the wind. "Yes, I said. I do." Her eyes searched mine. Then she pressed play. Caroline's voice filled the car. Light, relaxed, a little drunk maybe. The way she sounded after 2 glasses of wine when charm became sharper around the edges. "Mara, I need you to stop acting like Elliot is some wounded animal. He's fine. He likes being the good husband. It gives him purpose." Then Mara's voice quieter. "You're using him." Caroline laughed. That laugh hurt worse than the sentence. "I married stability. Don't make it dramatic." My hand tightened around the phone. The recording continued. Mara said, "Does he know about Nathan?" There was a pause. Then Caroline, almost bored. "He doesn't need to. Not yet." Nathan. I knew a Nathan. Caroline's financial consultant. Tall, polished, always too comfortable touching her lower back at parties. I had noticed once, asked once. She had rolled her eyes and told me I was embarrassing myself. I had apologized. That memory burned. The recording wasn't done. Mara's voice sharpened. "And the lawyer?" Caroline sighed. "I'm just being smart. If things get ugly, I need people to understand the pattern." "Elliot is quiet." "That works for me. Quiet men are easy to make suspicious if you describe them correctly." The car seemed to tilt. I looked through the windshield at the dark pharmacy windows, at the rain blurring the reflection of my own face. Quiet men are easy to make suspicious. Mara stopped the recording. I didn't speak. I couldn't. For 9 years, I had thought the worst thing in my marriage was being unloved politely. I had been wrong. The worst thing was realizing my wife had studied my gentleness like a weakness in a contract. Mara pulled the phone back into her lap. "I'm sorry," she whispered. That was when I looked at her. Really looked. Her mascara was smudged at the corner of one eye. Her hands were still shaking. She looked like a woman who had spent weeks standing between loyalty and decency, and tonight decency had finally dragged her out into the rain. "You recorded that?" She nodded. "After she asked me to lie the first time. I thought, I don't know what I thought. Evidence, maybe. Protection. I hated myself for doing it." "Why didn't you tell me then?" She flinched, but she didn't hide. "Because you were married to my best friend." "She doesn't sound like your best friend." "No." Her mouth twisted. "She sounds like someone I kept making excuses for because we had history." That answer was too honest to be clean. I looked back at the road ahead. "How long?" Mara understood. "Nathan?" I nodded once. "I don't know exactly." "Guess." She swallowed. "Months." Months. The word landed without drama. That somehow made it heavier. I thought about Caroline coming home late. Caroline showering before bed. Caroline telling me not to wait up. Caroline kissing my cheek in front of people and turning away before I could believe it meant anything. I thought about Mara at our dinners, getting quieter lately, leaving early, looking at me sometimes like she wanted to say something and hated herself for wanting it. And then I thought about tonight. Her in my car. Her hand shaking. Her saying, "Take me somewhere private." A sentence that could have made her look guilty if someone only heard that part. Maybe that was the worst of it. Caroline had built a world where even the person warning me could be made to look like the problem. "What did she ask you to say?" I said. Mara's eyes closed for a second. If a lawyer ever called, or if you ever questioned her schedule, I was supposed to say she'd been with me on Thursdays. Dinner, drinks, yoga, whatever matched. Thursdays? My voice sounded distant. Caroline had been gone almost every Thursday for 2 months. Mara nodded. I never agreed, not once. I believe you. She looked at me so quickly it almost hurt. You shouldn't. Not yet. You should question everything tonight. I am. Then question me too. I did. Her lips parted slightly. I handed back her phone. You're still here, I said. That answers more than you think. For a second, her face changed, like the sentence had touched a place she had been trying to keep out of the night. Then she looked away, blinking hard. I'm not good in this story, Elliot. That's not true. I stayed quiet too long. You came tonight. Because she went too far. That counts. She shook her head. No, it only means I found my line late. There was something so painfully decent in that, I had to look away. Because Caroline would have turned that guilt into strategy. Mara turned it into responsibility. That was the difference. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. My wife had spent years making small jokes out of me until I learned to smile before I felt the cut. Mara had sat at the same tables and noticed where the knife went in. Caroline had known I was loyal and called it easy. Mara had known I was loyal and tried, too late maybe, but still tried, to protect me from being punished for it. That was the first moment I felt the marriage loosen inside me. Not end, not yet, but loosen. Like a rope I had been holding with both hands had finally burned through the skin enough for me to wonder why I was still gripping it. My phone rang. Caroline. Both of us looked at the screen. Mara immediately straightened, wiping her cheek. You should answer. I don't know if I can. You have to act normal until you know what you're doing. That was practical. It was also kind. I answered on speaker before I could think too much. Hey! Caroline's voice came through smooth and annoyed. Where are you? Driving Mara home. You've been gone almost 40 minutes. Rain ticked against the roof. Mara stared at her hands. I kept my voice even. Roads are wet. Caroline sighed. Of course. Did she make it weird? Mara's head lifted. I went still. What? Oh, don't do that. Caroline laughed softly. She's been emotional lately. I think she's lonely. Just drop her off and come home, okay? I don't need another one of her little moral spirals tonight. Mara closed her eyes. There it was. The cruelty, casual enough to pass as personality. I looked at Mara then, and something inside me settled. Not desire, not yet. Decision. I'll be home soon, I said. Caroline softened her voice. Good. And Elliot? Yeah? You're sweet for helping her. Just don't let her make you feel responsible for things that aren't yours. The call ended. For a few seconds, the car was silent. Mara let out a breath like she had been holding it underwater. I'm sorry, she said again. I turned the engine back on. Stop apologizing for her. Mara looked at me. I pulled out of the parking lot, but I didn't turn toward her apartment. She noticed immediately. Elliot? I need one more thing before I go home. What? I looked at the road ahead, my hand steady on the wheel in a way the rest of me wasn't. I need you to show me Nathan. Mara went quiet. Then she unlocked her phone again. And this time, when she handed it to me, she wasn't just giving me proof. She was giving me the last chance to keep believing in a marriage Caroline had already abandoned. Mara showed me Nathan on her phone. Not just a name, a face. A polished man in a tailored coat standing beside Caroline in the corner of a hotel bar downtown. The photo had been taken from across the street through glass, probably by Mara herself. Caroline was laughing up at him with her hand on his chest. Not friendly, not professional, not anything I could explain away without becoming pathetic. The timestamp was a Thursday. Of course it was. I stared at the picture until the edges of the screen blurred. Mara sat beside me in the passenger seat, silent. That was what made her different from Caroline. Caroline filled every uncomfortable moment until she controlled it. Mara let the pain be what it was. I followed her once, Mara said quietly. I'm not proud of it. I looked at her. Why? Because she used my name. Because if she was going to make me part of the lie, I needed to know what the lie was covering. I handed the phone back. My fingers brushed hers again. This time, neither of us pulled away immediately. It was half a second, maybe less. But in that half second, I felt the strangest thing. Not desire first, relief. Someone was sitting beside me in the wreckage and not asking me to pretend it was furniture. Mara looked down at our hands, then slowly moved hers back into her lap. I'm sorry, she whispered. I almost told her to stop apologizing again. Instead, I said, thank you. That broke something in her face, just a little. Enough that I saw how badly she had needed those words and how much she hated needing them. I drove her home after that, not to her apartment door. She asked me to stop a block away. If Caroline checks the doorbell camera or texts the neighbors or... She stopped and shook her head. I hate that I sound paranoid. You don't. I do. You sound like someone who knows her. That made her quiet. Before she got out, she turned back to me. Don't confront her tonight. Mara, please. Her voice tightened. Not because she deserves time, because you deserve proof, sleep, and a plan. I laughed once, without humor. I'm not sure sleep is coming. Then proof and a plan. She opened the door, then paused. Rain slipped through the gap, cold against my hand. Elliot. Yeah? She's going to be sweet when you get home. I looked at her. Mara's eyes were sad. That's what she does when she thinks she might be losing control. She was right. Caroline was waiting in the kitchen when I came home. Barefoot, silk robe, hair loose around her shoulders, a glass of water beside her instead of wine, which meant she wanted to look sober, soft, reasonable. There you are, she said. No accusation, no sharpness, just warmth. Perfectly measured. I stood in the doorway, still wearing my coat. She crossed the room and touched my chest with 2 fingers. You look tired. I used to love when she noticed that. Now I wondered what she wanted from it. Long night, I said. She sighed. Mara can be a lot. I know she means well, but she gets dramatic when she feels lonely. There it was again. A small poison delivered like concern. She seemed upset, I said carefully. Caroline's mouth curved. She's always upset about something. Me. If it didn't hurt, I said, then I'd have to admit I gave 9 years to nothing. Mara's voice softened. It wasn't nothing. You were real in it. That counts. I closed my eyes. That sentence did more damage to my self-control than every recording Caroline had made. Because my wife had spent years making me feel foolish for being good. And Mara, with one sentence, made it feel like goodness had not been the mistake. I heard her breathing on the other end. Then she said, very quietly, I shouldn't say this. Mara, I know. What? A pause. Then, barely above a whisper, I hate that she had you and didn't know what she had. The line went silent again. My hand tightened around the phone. Every part of me wanted to say something I had no right to say yet. So I didn't. I held the line, I held the boundary, barely. Finally, I said, I'm still married. I know, she whispered, but not for long. Her breath caught, and that was the first time the truth between us stopped feeling impossible and started feeling like something waiting on the other side of a locked door. That evening, I printed the messages, saved the recordings, copied the statements, and called a divorce attorney. Then I waited in the living room for Caroline to come home. This time, I wasn't smiling. Caroline came home at 7:28. I remember the time because I had spent almost an hour staring at the clock like it was going to give me courage. The front door opened. Her heels clicked across the entryway. She called out my name in that soft voice she used when she wanted the house to feel normal before checking whether I was. Elliot? I stood in the living room. On the coffee table in front of me were 3 neat stacks, messages, bank statements, printed transcripts from the recordings. Caroline stopped in the archway. For 1 second, her face was blank. Then she smiled. That was the first thing she did. Not panic, not guilt, not shock. She smiled like she had walked into a room and found a spill she intended to make someone else clean up. "What is this?" she asked. "The end," I said. Her smile tightened. "That's dramatic." "I agree." She walked closer, slowly, eyes moving over the papers. "Have you been going through our finances?" "Our finances," I said. Interesting phrase. Her gaze flicked to me. There it was. The first crack. I picked up the hotel charge and set it on top of the pile. Thursdays. Her face changed again, but only slightly. Caroline had always been good at small corrections. She could move from wife to victim to offended queen in less than a breath. "You followed me?" "No." "Then who did?" I didn't answer. She understood anyway. Mara's name arrived in the room before either of us said it. Caroline laughed once, low and bitter. "Of course." I said nothing. "She has wanted this for years," Caroline said. I looked at her. "Wanted what?" "You." She said it like an accusation. Poor sweet Elliot being comforted by my lonely, self-righteous best friend. God, she must have loved playing savior. That was when I almost lost my temper. Not because she insulted me, I was used to that. Because even now, facing proof of what she had done, Caroline's first instinct was to make Mara the dirty part of the story. I kept my voice flat. "This is not about Mara. Oh, please. It's about Nathan, the lawyer, the money, the lies, the recordings, the story you were building about me before I even knew there was a war." Her eyes flashed. "You recorded me?" Mara did. "Exactly. After you asked her to lie." Caroline's mouth opened, then closed. That silence was the closest thing to a confession I was going to get. I picked up one transcript. "You said I was decent. That's why it was easy." She looked away. Just for a second. But I saw it. And strangely, that hurt more than if she had screamed. Because in that tiny look away, I saw the truth. She had meant it. She had not said it in anger. She had said it because that was how she saw me. Useful, easy, manageable. A good man translated by a selfish woman into a convenient one. "I wanted to save this marriage," I said. Her eyes came back to mine. "I did. Even when you made me feel small. Even when you laughed at me in front of people. Even when I started sleeping beside you and feeling lonelier than I felt alone." For once, she didn't interrupt. "Tonight," I said, "I realized there is nothing here to save." Caroline's face hardened. "Because Mara told you that?" "No, because you did." I touched the papers on the table. Every word. She folded her arms. "So what, Elliot? You want a divorce? Fine. But don't pretend you're clean if you run straight to her." That one landed exactly where she aimed it. Because some part of me had thought of Mara all day. Her voice. Her shaking hands. Her saying I was real in the marriage and that it counted. The fact that my wife knew me for 9 years and used my decency as a handle, while Mara had known me from the outside and still tried to protect the one part of me I was starting to feel ashamed of. But I would not let Caroline make that ugly, so I said, "I'm not leaving because I want Mara." Caroline smirked. "I'm leaving because I don't want you." The room went quiet. That was the sentence she couldn't twist. Not into jealousy, not into seduction, not into betrayal. It was clean. It was mine. By 9, I had packed a suitcase. Caroline did not cry, not really. She tried once near the stairs, voice trembling, eyes bright, saying, "You're making a mistake." And maybe the man I had been a week earlier would have rushed to comfort her. But I had heard her say she could make me apologize before I knew what I had done. So I watched the tears gather, and I did not move. That was when she finally looked afraid. Not heartbroken. Afraid. Because the old trick didn't work anymore. I stayed at a hotel near the river. Small room, bad art, one armchair, a vending machine humming outside the door like it had secrets. At 11:40, someone knocked. I already knew. I opened the door. Mara stood in the hallway holding a paper bag and my old wool scarf. "You left this at the house?" she said. I stared at the scarf. "You went there." "Not inside." Caroline threw it onto the porch after texting me several creative insults. That almost made me laugh. Almost. Mara looked past me into the room. Are you okay? No. She nodded as if she respected the answer too much to soften it. I brought food, she said. You probably didn't eat. That did something to me, not the food, the noticing. Caroline would have asked why I was being difficult. Mara brought soup in a paper bag and stood in a hotel hallway like she didn't know whether she was allowed to care this much. You shouldn't be here, I said. I know. Caroline will use it. I know. Then why did you come? Her eyes lifted to mine. Because today you found out your whole house was full of lies, she said quietly. And I couldn't stand the idea of you sitting inside one more room alone. I looked at her, and there it was. The thing I had been trying not to name, not temptation, not escape, care. Plain, inconvenient, dangerous care. I stepped back and let her in. She set the food on the desk, then stayed near the door like she was afraid of making the room smaller. I'm not here to be anything, she said quickly. I just wanted to make sure you had dinner and the scarf. Then I'll go. Mara, she stopped. You didn't destroy my marriage. Her face tightened. You didn't, I said. You told me the truth after Caroline already destroyed it. Her eyes filled. I waited too long. Maybe. That honesty hurt her, but she nodded. So did I said. She looked at me. I waited too long to admit that kindness without respect is not a marriage. I waited too long to stop laughing at jokes that made me disappear. I waited too long to believe what I felt every time you looked at me like I was still there. Her breath caught. The space between us changed, not suddenly. It had been changing all night. Maybe longer. I stepped closer. She didn't move away. I'm still married, I said. I know. My attorney files Monday. I know. I want this, I said. And the words came out rougher than I meant them to. I want you, but I won't let Caroline turn the first honest thing I've felt in years into something dirty. Mara's tears finally slipped over. Then she whispered, Then we wait. I should have let that be the end of it. I really should have. But she reached for the scarf at the same time I did, and our hands met again. This time, neither of us pulled away. The kiss was not planned. It was not careful enough. It was not long, but it happened. A quiet, aching break in the middle of all the restraint we had been trying to hold. When it ended, Mara stepped back first, one hand over her mouth, eyes wide with guilt and longing. I closed my eyes. Not because I regretted it, because I didn't. That was the problem. Mara reached for the door. I should go, she whispered. I nodded, even though every part of me wanted to ask her to stay. She opened the door, then looked back. I'll wait, she said. And then she left me standing in that hotel room with cold soup on the desk, my wife's lies in a folder, and the first kiss that felt less like betrayal than the beginning of a life I was terrified to deserve. Mara kept her promise. That was the first thing that made me trust the future, not the kiss. Not the way she looked at me before leaving the hotel room, like walking away physically hurt. The promise. I'll wait. And she did. Monday morning, my attorney filed the separation paperwork. By Wednesday, Caroline had already tried 3 versions of the story. In one, I had become cold and paranoid. In another, Mara had manipulated me. In the third, Caroline was simply heartbroken that private marital issues were being twisted by outsiders. She posted nothing directly. Caroline was too polished for that. She preferred whispers, carefully worded texts, lunch with mutual friends, a few strategic tears in the right kitchens. But she had miscalculated one thing. Mara wasn't the only person who had hurt her. Over the next month, small truths started surfacing. A friend remembered Caroline joking that I was too loyal to check receipts. Another admitted Caroline had asked whether she could say they were together on a Thursday if needed. Nathan's name stopped being a rumor when his wife called my attorney after finding hotel charges of her own. That part I didn't expect. Caroline had not just damaged my marriage. She had stepped into someone else's too. The divorce was not cinematic. No courtroom explosion, no dramatic confession under oath. Just attorneys, documents, financial disclosures, and the slow humiliation of paper telling the truth better than people do. The hidden account came out. The hotel charges came out. The transfer attempts came out. And when Caroline's attorney tried to float the idea that I had been emotionally controlling, my attorney produced the messages where Caroline had asked Mara to lie and the recording where she called me decent enough to manipulate. After that, the tone changed. Caroline became less wounded, more cooperative. Funny how evidence can improve someone's manners. I moved into a small apartment across town. It had a view of a brick wall, a refrigerator that made a clicking sound, and exactly one chair for the first 2 weeks. Mara came once. Only once. She stood in the doorway with a box of dishes she said she didn't need, though every plate was carefully wrapped and none of them were chipped. She did not come inside at first. "I can leave these here," she said. Mara. Her eyes lifted. I had thought about our kiss every day, every hour if I was being honest, not in a guilty fantasy way, in a painful, unfinished way. But I also knew Caroline was still looking for a way to make Mara the headline. So I stayed back. "Thank you," I said. Mara nodded. The space between us was full of everything we were not doing. Then she smiled sadly and said, "This is harder than I thought." "Waiting?" "No." Her voice softened. "Not taking care of you." That sentence nearly broke me, because Caroline had called my loyalty easy. Mara looked at care like a thing that required discipline. We waited 3 months before having dinner alone again, not because we stopped wanting each other, because we wanted the beginning to survive the story people would try to tell about it. When the divorce was finalized, Caroline kept part of what the law required and lost the things she had tried to take by performance. She did not get the version where I apologized. She did not get to paint Mara as a thief. She did not keep the group of friends who had finally seen the pattern clearly enough to be embarrassed by their own laughter. I did not celebrate. That surprised people. But divorce, even from someone who hurt you, is still a funeral for the life you thought you had. Mara understood that. On the day it was final, she didn't bring champagne. She brought dinner. Soup again, because apparently that had become our language. She stood in my apartment kitchen wearing a soft blue sweater, hair tucked behind one ear, looking at the single chair by the table. "You still only have one chair," she said. I was avoiding commitment. "To furniture? It starts there." She laughed, small, real. I hadn't heard that sound without sadness attached to it in months. We ate sitting on the floor, backs against the kitchen cabinets, because the one chair felt too formal and the couch had not arrived yet. For a while we talked about ordinary things. Her work, my apartment, the fact that Caroline had apparently joined a wellness retreat, which Mara said was on brand for someone who needed professional help but preferred scented candles. I laughed harder than I expected. Then the quiet returned. Mara set her bowl aside. "Are you free now?" she asked. I looked at her. There were many answers. Legally, yes. Emotionally, not entirely. Practically getting closer. So I chose the only useful truth. "I'm free enough to choose carefully." Her eyes softened. "And what are you choosing?" "You," I said. Slowly, properly, without hiding. She closed her eyes for half a second. When she opened them, the fear was still there. But so was relief. This time, when I kissed her, it was not in a hotel room full of wreckage. It was in my unfinished kitchen beside 2 bowls of soup with divorce papers signed and no one's lies standing between us. That kiss felt like a beginning, a real one. We did go slow.